Alright, we're rolling. Lads, welcome to a video about Latin 1. This here book, the Oxford Latin Course by Maurice Baum and James Morwood, will be our tour guide into your journey through Latin 1. And I know what you're probably thinking, but don't worry, it's going to be in full color. You're going to want to, come down here to the intro and skip all that because this is the important part. This is how to say everything in Latin. So C's will always be hard, like cat. G's, like God. H is never left out because then he'd be lonely. I's will usually have an A following it, and this is pronounced like yom. Q's will always have a U following them, and it's pronounced like quick. I can't roll my R's, my teacher couldn't roll her R's, so you don't have to roll yours. S's are always sounding like S's, and V's are pronounced like W's. So, in English, Volkswagen would be in German, Volkswagen, and then in Latin, Volkswagen. Now down here to the vowels. Vowels are usually pronounced normally, but if they have this little line over them called a macron, their sounds are changed. So an A with a macron will sound like father. E with a macron, aim. I with a macron, deep. O with a macron, full. And U with a macron, fool. We'll cross this bridge when we get there. But here we are. Chapter 1. You're going to be greeted by these beautiful pictures. When I look at them, I feel like, I'm in Rome in real life. But you're going to want to skip this for now and come right down here to the vocabulary. Now, if Latin was a horse, this vocabulary box right here would be the horn, because this is where the magic happens. Latin vocabulary is just like any other vocabulary. It's not much you can do, except a lot of English words come from Latin words, and so you can use English cognates to give you hints. For example, this first verb here, ambulat, we get the word ambulatory, which means, relating to walking, and so with that knowledge, you can assume this means he, she walks. Down here, we get the word labor from this, work, and so laborat, we can assume means he, she works. So other than the words that have English cognates, your best chance at memorizing all this is flashcards or Quizlet, 5 minutes every day, and a lot of coffee, because some of the words are very annoying to memorize. All these verbs here are in the third person, they're in the present tense, and they're all singular. Why is that important? Well, let me bring up my handy-dandy verb chart to explain. These verbs here have what's called conjugation, and this vowel here, right here, the A, gives it away that it's part of the first conjugation. And we'll look at the other conjugations later. But for now, we'll take this first verb here, ambulat, and write the root, ambu, and then take out the ending. Now this chart here gives you all the endings you need for every scenario you need to use this verb in. For example, if I wanted to say I walk, I would write ambulo, because O is the ending for first person singular verbs in the first conjugation. If I wanted to say you walk singular, I would take out this ending. Okay, that didn't work. And write ambulas, which means you walk, singular. Should have mentioned this earlier, the first conjugation vowel is A. So when you have this root, ambul, you'll add the first conjugation vowel, which is an A, and then apply the ending, which in this case is S, to say you walk. For third person, if I wanted to say he walks, I would take out this S, somehow. Okay. And write ambulat, which this T is the third person singular ending. To say we walk, I would apply the plural first person ending, mus, and say ambulamus, which means we walk. Same thing can be applied to the plural of second person, which is ambulatis, which means we walk. And lastly, we would apply the third plural ending, nt, ambulant, to say they walk. Now you can do this with every verb. You have to memorize this chart. Again, got to get flashcards or a Quizlet and coffee, because this verb chart took a bit for me to memorize at first as well. Taking this second verb here, cannot, we know it's in the first conjugation because of the A vowel. And we would take out the ending, cane. If I wanted to say I eat, then I would write kano. If I wanted to say you eat, I would say kenas, because this A is the first conjugation vowel, and this S is the ending for the singular and second person. I would write kenat for he, she, it eats. For we eat, I would write kenamus. Then for you eat, plural, kenatis. Oops. And then finally, for the third person, plural, kenat, which means they eat. So the first conjugation verbs all end the same way with this chart here, OST, MUS, TISNT. Sorry, most verbs follow that OST, MUS, TISNT chart. But Latin says, no, it'd be too simple if every single verb followed that chart, and they introduced what's called irregular verbs. The first irregular verb is very common. Your book loves it, is this est. Est, 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 est. Every sentence. That verb is a form of the verb sum, which means to be. Now, with the verbs, you should try memorizing the four principal parts. So, we have this verb right here, ambulat, right? This is just one part of many. What you should do is you should get a Latin dictionary, or you can just look one up online, and find the four principal parts. The four principal parts to the verb sum would be sum, esse, fui, futurus. This first part is the first person singular in the present tense. This second part is the infinitive. In English, an infinitive is just to verb, so esse would be to be. These next two you don't really have to focus on until a little bit later. So, for now, let us see how I would say you are, or he, she, it is. We'll recreate the chart here. Plural, first, second, third. My handwriting is very beautiful. And so, irregular verbs don't follow any patterns. You just have to memorize them. So this first one is sum. Oops. Which means I am. The second person singular would be es, which means you are. The third would be est, which means he, she, it is. Over here, we have sumus, for we are. Down here is estis, you are, plural, and down here we have sunt. Sum es est, sumus estis sunt. Now, those were just the verbs. Now we get to the nouns. Nouns have what's called declensions. This noun, this first one, casa, is first declension because The A ending tells us it's in first declension. I'll explain what that means later. But I have another handy dandy chart. What? Move this. And we write singular, plural. Actually, that's a bit too close. Singular, plural over here. Now, nouns have different cases. This first one is the nominative case. Second, genitive. Third, dative. Fourth, accusative. And the last, the ablative. Now, each case has its own purpose. The nominative case is normally used for the subject of the sentence. So, if I wanted to say, I am going to get ice cream, I would be placed in the nominative case because I am the subject. The genitive usually represents possession. The dative, the indirect object. The accusative, the direct object. And the ablative is pretty much like, I guess, prepositional phrases. A lot of things go in the ablative, but for now, you just write prep phrases. So, memorize this. You should know how to spell it. You should know their functions. Now for the nouns. Taking this first noun, casa, we will write casa and apply the endings. So, for the nominative case in the singular, first declension nouns will always end in A, which means the pattern is this: a, I, a, with a macron. All first declension nouns will always have these endings. And in the plural, I, autumn, is, os, and is. Now we can take casa and apply the endings. Kasai, kasai, kasam, and kasa with a macron. In the plural, kasai, kasaram, kasis, kasas, and kasis. If I wanted to say, well, this is out of context, but just for, I guess, translating into English, the nominative singular of casa would be house. So the house as the subject. The house is cleaning itself or something like that. The genitive kasai would be the possession. So if I wanted to say the house's broom is moving, then that would be in kasai. The dative, the indirect object, would be to or for the house, because it's the indirect object, it's receiving the direct object. The accusative would be for the direct object, so I am running to the house. The house would be in kasam. And finally, the ablative, like to, for, with, you would put that in the ablative, kasa. For the plural, kasai, the houses are playing together because houses play together. Kasadam, the houses is brooms, plural, possession. The dative, the indirect object, so to, for. Kasas, the direct object, I am running to the houses. Finally, the ablative, the prepositional phrases with, from, in, or on, all of those would fall in the ablative. Now, first conjugation is tricky because the plural nominative is the same as the genitive and dative, singular. And so it's really easy to confuse or mess them up. That's why you have to memorize each ending and then look at the context and decide which case it will be. Let's come back up to these beautiful pictures up here, and you should have memorized all these words. And look at these sentences. Quintus est puer Romanus. Now, Latin sentence structure is not the same as English sentence structure. You can't translate the English and then piece together a sentence from the English words. You have to look at the cases. So the first step in translating this sentence is, number one, look for the verb. Quintus est. There's our verb. Est is our verb. Now, looking at est, and back from the chart that I had earlier, we can see that it's third person and singular, which means we're looking for a third person singular subject. Looking here. Oh, Quintus is third person singular. How do I know that? Well, I have another handy dandy chart right here. I'm very sorry, Latin is very confusing. Now we have the second declension. So, in Quintus, the US tells us it's first declension. Just for example, down here, scintilla, the A tells us it's first declension, but the US tells us this word is in the second declension. So, I'm just going to abbreviate because I am lazy and my hand hurts. Accusative, ablative. The second declension endings are as follows. Us, E, O, M, A, with a macron. For the plural, it is E, Orum, Is, Os, Is. Now, if we look at Quintus, which is a name, very common name, and this guy won't delete, we have Quintus. We apply the ending, quinti. We apply the dative ending, quinto. The accusative ending, quintem. And the ablative ending, quinte. For the plural, this would be quinti, quintorum, quintis, quintos, and quintis. Now you'll notice again here, the plural nominative, quinti, is the same as the singular genitive. And that is very troubling. That is why we have to look at the context and determine which one it is. Is it singular? Is it plural? And that is why the verb is so important. If this was sumus instead of sum, that would tell us it's plural instead of singular. So we would look for I'm losing my mind. If it was plural, we'd look for a plural subject. If it was singular, it would be a singular subject. That's why, let's say for example, this was quinti. It could be either plural or singular, but this verb, because it is singular, tells us it's singular, quinti. Now obviously that was just an example. The actual word is quintus, and that tells us it's nominative and it's singular. The verb is singular and third person. So quintus is our subject. So quintus is, puer means boy, and Romanus means Roman. So Quintus is a Roman boy. Romanus is nominative because of the US ending. We know it's second declension because it's US and it's nominative. We can also tell by looking at the English, because I forgot to say this, but another case of the nominative is that it can be used for the predicate nominative. And so Romanus describes the subject here, Quintus. Quintus is a Roman boy. And so therefore, because it's describing the subject, it would also be in the nominative case. The same applies to puer. Quintus is a Roman boy. These three are nominative because they're basically all the same thing. To jump back again, Latin is very confusing. With verbs, with nouns, you have genders. So for example, this noun, agricola, agricolae. Which means farmer. This noun is masculine, and it is in the first declension because this A gives it away, and this genitive ending, agricolae, gives it away. This is an exception because most first declension nouns are feminine. The only exception to the feminine nouns in the first declension are jobs, because Romans are sexist. We have this job, farmer, poetae, which is masculine, and it means poet. We have nautai, which is masculine, and sailor. These are masculine, but they're still in the first declension. Gender, you just have to memorize it. There's nothing that gives it away. Most times, the only thing that gives it away is if it's a job that men usually did in Rome, it's going to be masculine. But you have masculine, feminine, and neuter nouns. And the scary thing about Latin is the neuter nouns decline differently than the masculine and feminine nouns. So, in the second declension, singular, nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, ablative. Normally, you would write, the endings are US, E, O, and A. You should memorize this and just constantly be memorizing this. These are the normal endings, right? But if you have a neuter noun, you just delete these. A neuter noun will end like this. The second declension can be US. This will be E, O, and the accusative will change. It will match the nominative. So this will be this will be O. This will be E, autumn, east, E, the nominative and accusative will match, and ease. This is for neuter nouns. So, for example, we have the masculine noun puer. This would be pueri, puero, puerum, and puero. This would be pueri, puerorum, pueris, pueros, and pueris. But if we have a neuter noun, this would then become, let's say bellum, spellum, belly, which means war, and it is neuter. This would be bellum, belly, bellow, bellum matches the nominative, and bellow. This would be belly, bellorum, bellis, belli matches the nominative, and bellies. This is only for neuter nouns. For neuter nouns, the accusative will match the nominative. So we delete all this. Come back to the sentences. Quintus in Apulia habitat, Apulia est in Italia. So, to dissect this sentence, we look for the verb first. Quintus, Apulia, habitat. There's our verb. Now, habitat is singular and third person, and it means to live. So we're looking for a singular subject, and in third person, Quintus. We know that it's the subject because it's also in the nominative. So Quintus lives in, this is Apulia. Then Apulia is in Italy. This is one case for why the macron is important right here. Apulia, they're spelled the same way, but the macron here tells us it is ablative, whereas just the A naked here tells us it's nominative. Therefore, this would be the subject. Apulia is in Italia. Coming down here, scintilla est femina romana in casa labora. We look for the verb est. Scintilla is a subject because it matches the verb, and in first declension, scintilla would be a feminine noun. The A gives it away, it's nominative, so scintilla is a subject. Scintilla is a feminine Roman, or a woman Roman. Wait, what am I saying? A Roman woman. These are the same as up here. The A, give it away, that's nominative because it's also describing scintilla, and so they would all fall in the nominative case. Over here, in casa laborat, laborat is our verb. We're looking for a third person singular subject, but there is no subject. That is where we imply the subject. Scintilla here would be brought over because there is no subject change. There's no other subject introduced, so we would just use the old one. So scintilla is working in the house. Casa is accusative because it is the direct object. Over here, Horatia puella romana est, in casa cenat. We have Horatia, a first declension noun because of the A, and nominative. Horatia is a Roman girl. In casa cenat. So we're looking for a third person singular subject, and so we would reuse Horatia. Horatia is eating in the house. That is how you would translate sentences. You always look for the verb first, look at what kind of subject it needs, and then translate the subject and then the rest of the sentence. We will move on from Latin or from chapter 1 in the next video, but to prepare, you can read all this history if you want. Learn this vocabulary. Again, flashcards, Quizlet, very important. And I will see you next time.